I can talk about this topic all day. The types of things you gotta follow as a creative person. I would even go as far as saying these are rules you have to follow as a creative person. I am addressing a question that was asked from me about what I believe is my creative process, or what a creative process looks like. But I do want to go into some general rules I follow that I feel that applies to everybody about the creative process. So without further ado, let's get into it. The first rule in my creative process is knowing exactly what I like, which means knowing exactly the type of music that I like, the type of visuals that go with it. It's the taste. Everybody with a taste needs to follow that taste during the creative process, needs to abide by that taste. This is when your intuition comes in. This is when you're hearing something and it triggers something in your mind. Ooh, I like this. Why do I like it? This process becomes a lot smoother when you actually start studying what you like. For example, when it comes to music, what types of songs are your type of songs? You know, if you were to collect a playlist, what types of songs go into your liked songs? Do you have a playlist for each type of music? What kind of playlist do you have? Do you happen to have EDM playlists, party playlists, reggae playlists, I don't know, international playlists, hip hop playlists? What types of playlists do you have? Because if you have a playlist of a certain style, that means you gravitate towards that style. And what types of songs do you place in those playlists? For example, in your hip hop playlist, what types of songs go into your hip hop playlist? What's your hip hop taste? What's your reggae taste? What's your EDM taste? These are very important because these are going to come in handy in session. And when you're creating, you're going to know what it is. You're going to get triggered as soon as you hear something that you like. The more you study what you like, and the more you can actually be critical about the type of quality that you're looking for. You know what I mean? A lot of times, a lot of creatives don't know what they're looking for because they don't know what they like, but something doesn't sound right to them. Why? Because you didn't study deep enough into what you like. Now, furthermore from that, you gotta assign time to your creative work and show up to your creative occasion as your most authentic self. This just comes down to valuing the ideas that come to you, valuing it as much as like actually creating something out of it. You know what I mean? If this is something you do as a lifestyle, whether this is something you do as a lifestyle or a hobby, I can kind of get deep and spiritual into this, but I feel like everything that we experience in life is an entity. You know what I mean? Like music is an entity. You know what I mean? It's an entity of its own in a way. All kinds of art forms, I feel like they're their own entity, and it's kind of like a girlfriend. You know what I mean? When you're like 3 years down a relationship, 4 years down a relationship, and you don't maintain that relationship, the relationship is gonna, not go so well for you. And you're gonna have to go to relationship therapy. Oh, what do we have to do? Couples therapy, Mr. Therapist, what do we gotta do? Certain things come with discipline. Certain things come with valuing it enough to set time aside for it. And once you set that time aside for it, whether it's once a week, once a day, once a month, you show up to that occasion, show up to it on time, and show up as your most authentic self. Because sometimes we get caught up in trying to please everybody and trying to see what's hot, what's out there, what do people gravitate towards. But we may not be feeling the same way. It's important to express how you truly feel, and then connect it with what you like. You know what I mean? So you create what you like based on how you feel. And that becomes an authentic creation, which ends up being a lot more powerful than something that you aim to target the masses with. Now, other than the session itself, it's important that you capture creative moments whenever they arrive to you. So this is a huge part of my creative process, because I like to capture my life. You know what I mean? And my life doesn't just happen in sessions. A lot happens in session, but my life doesn't just happen in session. But I have to have enough tools for me to work with in my sessions. Therefore, it's important for me to capture creative moments as I'm going through my day. This could happen with me as I'm taking a shower. This could happen as I'm having a conversation, which is one of my most favorite things. Sometimes I like to be alone, go for walks, and talk to myself. As crazy as that sounds. But a lot of these talks, I get so deep into it that I feel like it would be powerful if I implement these thoughts into a song. If I put these thoughts into lyrics and put them into a song, I feel like they'll be very impactful for the world to hear. And then even more impactful than that is when I'm having a very powerful conversation with a friend of mine. You know what I mean? Shout out my friends. There's some intellectuals and some gems come out of those conversations where I'm just like, damn, I wish the world could have heard this. So, just because we don't have cameras around us all the time, for me, I feel like what I can do to provide that value to the world is basically jot down the important points that I took away from that conversation, and then turn them into lyrics, turn them into a feeling in a song. What's important in a song actually is turning raw, pure energy into sound. So a lot of times when you experience these raw, pure energies, it's just they yearn to be turned into something. For a painter, it might be a painting. Sometimes you look at a painting, you could feel what the creator was going through. You listen to a song, you can feel what the artist is going through, which is also why it's important to show up to the creative occasion, because you're basically, if you're a creative, right? If you're a creative, it's important because you're turning your life into sound, and people can feel something when they listen to that, when they hear that. And then you could actually empower people by the gems that you have in your conversation. You could literally implement it in your lyrics, in your painting, in your music, in a way where it's impactful. Now, when you're in the session itself, it's important to walk in with a thrill that this creative journey may take you to places you may or may not have expected. You may not have expected for this to go this way. And that's a thrilling experience. When you go bungee jumping, you're going to be scared, but you don't necessarily know how scared are you going to be or how excited you're going to be. It's the fear / excitement of the unknown that makes something so thrilling. And every creative process, I feel like, holds that. It holds that thrill. And it's good to live with that thrill. Which is why it's important to come in as your most authentic self, because you may not expect what's about to come out of you. You may not expect it. And once it comes out, you're like, damn, I had that in me. You know what I mean? Damn, that's what I had in me. It's a powerful feeling. It's a powerful feeling to realize, like, I've been holding all that and I didn't even realize, you know? And creating does that for you. Now, it's good to walk in with like no expectations or like a thrill of just things may go or may not go how I expected. But something that I actually heard Rick Rubin talk about, which kind of like changed the game for me. You know how they say, oh, the most like common saying for creatives, oh, think outside the box. Like, you know, like when you hear creative, probably the top 5 statements that come to your head, think outside the box. Now, this is more of a think inside some boxes when you're creating. Like, as you create some boxes to think inside of and not go outside of. This actually allows your creativity to flourish. You know, as you create, you don't have to live by certain rules, but as you create, it's good to be like, okay, today I'm only gonna work with these elements. I'm only gonna work with these elements and that's it. I'm gonna have 2 elements. What if I was alone in an island and all I had was a pen and a paper and I had to make a song, right? I only have these elements. You probably start like crumpling the paper and, you know, maybe rubbing the pen on the tree and like start making sounds and you start creating music, right? You know what I mean? And then you're like, wow. It makes you realize how much is possible with so little, you know, because with so much, it's too limitless now. You know, you're in such a massive world of possibilities that it could be overwhelming. So this could kind of narrow your focus, which is a beautiful thing to do while you create. Now, this is where like you get to the nitty-gritty of creation. I'd like to have a holy trinity when I'm creating. As I'm creating in a session, I'd like to have the holy trinity, things to check off. I suggest everybody to have some kind of holy trinity for themselves. For me, it's basically lyrics, melody, music. You know what I mean? One could come first, the other 2 could follow, or they could kind of all arrive to you at the same time. But once I have these 3 down, that's like a nice accomplishment for me from a creative session. Now I can start sculpting it. Before I have these elements, I kind of don't have things to sculpt. You know what I mean? Sometimes I leave the lyrics out, you know? Yeah, why not? Sometimes I leave the lyrics out. Sometimes I even leave vocals out. So, you know, this is not like a rule, but for the songs that I typically make, they usually include my words, my lyrics, you know, as minimal or as like maximal, because like a lot of times writing rap, you gotta like put in a lot of like words and thoughts into it, and vice versa. A lot of times you want to keep it as minimally worded as possible. But yeah, it's a good thing to check off. I'm like, I got a nice melody down. I got that nice melody comes with some nice lyrics. And the nice lyrics, they come with a nice music to follow it. It's a beautiful thing. I gotta double check if this is recording, because if it's not, I get anxiety about shit like this, man. You know what I mean, bro? It's scary. Imagine like I said all those gems and it wasn't recording. Oh my god. Anyways, I just had to make sure it is recording. Now, the final things I was gonna say. So what do we bring up to so far? Know exactly what you like. Assign time to your creative work and show up as your most authentic self. That's 2 points. Assign time, capture creative moments whenever they arrive to you. Walking with a thrill of things may or may not go how you expect. That's number 4. Think inside a box, some boxes. That's number 5. And come up with your holy trinity. That's number 6. Now, the 7th thing that I want to wrap this section off with before I go into addressing your creative blocks is just master your craft. Yeah, master your craft. Get better at it every day, because you have more possibilities when you master your craft. When you get better at singing, you can come up with better melodies. When you become a better writer, you could also come up with better melodies, because you can make them sound good. You know, language is just has a way to it that like you could say the same message but word it differently, and when you word it one way, it's so much more pleasant to hear than otherwise. You know, and these are just things you master. You know, you master your craft, you get better at it, you allow your creativity to flourish more, because if you can't hit a certain note, it would suck, because damn, I wish I could just hit that note. It would sound crazy, right? That's why you want to master your craft. Simple, right? But powerful. And master your craft every day. Just put hours into it. As same thing I said, assign time to your creative work, assign time to your mastery. Whether it's on a daily basis, whether it's on a weekly basis, whatever it is, assign time, show up. You know, show up as your most authentic self. If you're drained, bust, just show up. But show up tired. You know, if you're uncreative, show up uncreative. It's okay. It's okay. Not everything has to be your best work. Not everything has to be a masterpiece. You know what I mean? Sometimes you just want to show up just to let the entity of creation or entity of music show the universe, show God that you're here. You know, you're living your purpose. That I could get deep into that, man. Like, you know, I truly believe that. I truly believe things have life. Like, music has life. You know, music has life. You gotta respect it. Your desk has a life. You gotta respect it, clean it, maintain it. Everything around you has a life. You gotta respect it and maintain it. I told you guys, it's gonna be long form stuff. You know, I'm taking you guys on a trip. I love talking like this. I love talking to you guys like this. Hey, now let's address creative blocks. You know, when you have creative blocks, it feels like nothing you do really impresses you. To me, it's a sign of leveling up. You've leveled up your standards. Your standards have become higher than what you have been doing, right? You basically outgrew what you have been doing. There's ways you could address this. That also could be based on how another reason for a creative block could be based on just maybe you let it out. Pretty much you let what you needed to let out. But this is important because you're showing up as your most authentic self. Is that when you let everything out, you might have some gibberish and nonsense built up. Let out the gibberish and the nonsense. Free flow. You know what I mean? Free flow, freestyle, free write, free sing, free melodize, you know? Let the gibberish out. Let the nonsense out. Let it out. And then you're gonna arrive at something that will trigger your liking. And this is when it's actually important to know what you like. Because if you know exactly what you like, you're very in tune with what you like, something's gonna trigger your liking. As you're just free flowing, freestyling, whatever, saying nonsense, you're like, that does sound good. Let me hold on. That does sound good. And those are powerful moments when you overcome that creative block just off of like free flowing your gibberish and nonsense, and then arriving at something that actually triggers your liking. That's powerful. That's some powerful stuff, you know? So that's one way to get over your creative block. Just let out the nonsense, let out the gibberish, let out the nonsense word, right, whatever. I was sipping on some juice and I slapped my head on the floor. Oh my God, this is so crazy. Like, bro, say whatever comes to your head, you know? And dog. And then at some point you're like, sipping on some juice and I hit it on the floor and I get it down bad and I never know. And when you never, oh shit, that's a nice flow, right? Just like that. Just like that's a nice flow right there. That triggered my liking, you know? So that's just a nice flow. I can put it down, put some words to it later. You know, nice. You've overcome. You've just took another step over your creative block. Now, another step to address your creative blocks is implement other people's ideas into your work, man. You know? Implement other people's ideas into your work. There's a reason why things are hits. There's a reason why, you know, songs are structured a certain way. Study that. Implement it. You know? Implement it. Like, listen to a song that you like that has happened to perform. Listen to it and see what it is about that song. Is it the arrangement? Is it the way they use their words? Is it the way they structure their hook? You know, is it like a one-worded hook that just repeats itself, or is it like a long hook? What are they doing to the bass? What is it about this song? Implement these ideas, you know, as an element to your creation, because your vibe and your nature kind of manifests itself into your music. So just implement other people's ideas. Sometimes that's what it takes to bring everything together. And lastly, I wanted to say, which is something about like just mastering your craft. It's the same thing. Learn something new about your craft and implement it in your work. You know, sometimes you learn something about chord progressions. You're like, I gotta try this out. No matter what kind of creative block you're in, if you learn some interesting chord progression, you're like, let me try this out. Let me try this drum pattern. You know, let me try. This guy said, you gotta write storytelling like this. You know what I mean? You gotta implement visual or like smell cues in your lyrics to make your story more visual, more vivid, you know? Okay, try it out. Try out saying a story only using smell cues. Try saying a story only using visual cues. You know, you just learn that about your craft. Implement it. You know, that has nothing to do with your creative block. That just, you could just implement that. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be a creation of yours. It could be, but just implement it. See where it takes you. You know, learn something and apply it. But I wrote a nice sentence. I'm trying to remember it just to recap this whole thing. You don't always have to, not every creation of yours has to be your best creation, but your best creations are created as a result of you showing up to your creative occasion without an expectation of what's about to come out. And just because you showed up, you created a masterpiece, you know? But you initially, you're like, I'm just showing up. But more times than not, you didn't expect to create a masterpiece. You just showed up, but you just made a masterpiece because you showed up, and that became one of your best creations. But not every creation has to be your best creation, and not every creation has to be even a thing that you do anything with. Sometimes you just create just to create. That's it, because that's what you do. That's what creatives do. That's it. Love.